All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this pre-holiday session, at least if you're in the United States. My name is Chris Neidl. I am one of the co-founders of OpenAir, and I am your host today of This is CDR. This is CDR is OpenAir's sort of flagship educational program, where on most Tuesdays, 12 p.m. Eastern, we get together with a leading expert or innovator or entrepreneur in the CDR space to talk about the cool work, project, or company that they're working on. And really thrilled for today's session with Helen Lundebye from CDRjobs, which is exciting in its own right, but it's just a healthy indicator, I think, of how much our sector is growing and evolving, that we're now at a place where a service such as CDRjobs is wanted, and not only wanted, but heavily subscribed. As Helen will talk, there's a lot of activity going on there, which is exciting. So before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to my partner in crime and co-host Tank Chen in just a minute to introduce Helen and the subject. We'll have a presentation from Helen, and then me and Tank will ask some questions, but we encourage you to please drop your own questions in the comments section, and we'll go ahead and wrap those into the conversation. So just to get started, a little bit about OpenAir is we are a all-volunteer, citizen-led global action network that's focused on advancing carbon dioxide removal wherever we can. And the way that OpenAir's functions is it's all virtual. If you haven't joined our Discord yet, Tank will throw it in their Discord as sort of like a gamer version of Slack, where a lot of the conversations between our members occurs, including a lot of the activities and actions or missions that our members are taking to advance CDR. There's four main areas, or what we call domains of impact, that our members work on. The first being advocacy. We are very, very involved in policy advocacy for CDR at the municipal, national, and sub and state level. We work on a lot of different pieces of legislation that we research and write and get introduced. We have a very, very full 2025 coming up ahead. We also have a really dynamic and fun R&D or maker wing or citizen science wing of OpenAir. These are people who are doing unique collaborative research or design and building projects. I'll give you an example of that in a second in an open source way. Education for sure. This is CDR as an example of one of our education missions, where our goal is to really just increase awareness and understanding and enthusiasm for carbon dioxide removal through a variety of channels. And then also enterprise, where we have members that get together to even think through novel carbon dioxide removal business models or to support new enterprises or projects. And so just to illustrate examples of each of these missions, and I'll mix these up as we go. I used the same examples last week, but we do have a lot coming up in 2025. In terms of advocacy, one of the bills that we're working on is a state bill in New York, which we're just finishing drafting and now trying to get introduced for the 2025 legislative session. This would create really interesting and strong incentives for biochar producers and adopters. And so that's an exciting example. If you're in New York or interested in biochar, please do talk to us on our Discord and we'll get you involved. In terms of our R&D projects, one project that's near and dear to my heart, just got a new piece of equipment for it yesterday, is a project called Epiphyte. And this is a little miniature direct air capture machine that we have been working on for a couple of years, built the first version of it in University of Pennsylvania last year, and are now have started building the latest version of it here at UT Austin, where I'm based, with an amazing group of about 30 engineering students. And that'll be entirely open source, and hopefully we'll build a giant global community of teams working and evolving that. As far as education, in addition to This is CDR, definitely want to check out CDR AI. This is a project that me, Tank, and a handful of other members put together an LLM like ChatGPT, but just for CDR. And it's backed up by over 700 peer-reviewed journal articles about various different subjects related to CDR, as well as government data. And we're continuing to add to that as we go. But it allows people, whether you're brand new to the subject or you want to do a deep dive on ocean alkalinity enhancement or whatever it may be, it's a good, transparent source of information that's, again, backed by really credible, high-quality sources. So Tank will drop the link to that. And then lastly, this is a project that we're probably going to do with This Is CDR out of the new year, one that we're very proud of. And this is where our members got together and supported an amazing entrepreneur in Africa's oldest refugee settlement, Uganda, Naka Valley, to create an enterprise where they're making biochar, a lot of it now already, and they just got certified. And they're able to deploy biochar in this agricultural community that is very much on the front line and very much already dealing with the impacts of climate change. It's a very replicable model. So you'll hear more about that in a future This Is CDR. So to today's program, as I mentioned, incredibly excited to have Helen Lundebye join us. CDRjobs is unique and very much needed and extremely cool, not just as a platform to connect employers and prospective employees, but is a really, really good source of granular data on what the job market is like in CDR. And so I'm going to hand over to Tank right now, who I'll bring up on the stage, and he will go ahead and introduce Helen, and then we'll have Helen take it away. So go for it, Tank.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Tank Chen. I'm a volunteer at Open Air. I'm based in Taiwan, and I work on communications. Some housekeeping notes before we start. Our format will be a short presentation followed by a few prepared questions, then moderated audience Q&A. So if you have any questions, please type it into the StreamYard chat box, and I'll be able to address them. Also, this event is being recorded, so we will send video links to everyone who's registered and also post to Open Air's website and YouTube channel. Today, we're very excited to welcome Helen Lundebye. Helen is the co-founder of CDRjobs, the sector's leading job platform. She is also a policy research consultant working with Carbon Future, the leading platform for high-quality CDR credits. She has a diverse background spanning 2 decades working in various impact sectors across education, tech, and international development. So, Helen, welcome.
Hi, Tank. Hi, thanks for joining. It's really exciting to be here because Open Air was actually kind of the first place that I turned to in my CDR journey over 2 years ago. Yeah, your community is really active, really awesome. It's incredibly led by all volunteers. I kind of jokingly had a call with Chris, I think once at like 5 a.m. his time. I mean, I don't know how he squeezes it all in, but yeah, super exciting. I feel honored to be here today. So thanks for having me. So today I want to talk to you and introduce you to CDRjobs. This is a kind of a new venture that we just started back in May, and I'm really excited to kind of give you an overview of what we are, what we've been up to, and kind of what we found out so far. So first off, I just want to introduce you about like what our mission is. So we are trying to support the transition of thousands and hopefully soon millions of people into the CDR sector. I know I'm preaching to the choir here on this kind of open air community, but we know that there's no net zero without CDR. And in order for us to scale to climate relevance, we need to scale rapidly. And in order to do that, we need to bring the talent into the sector. So we provide a one-stop shop for all jobs in CDR. You don't need to post your jobs on CDRjobs. That's kind of our USP. We do that for you. We kind of scrape the internet for all the jobs and we post them all in one place. And with that data, we're kind of able to derive crucial insights on how the job market is growing. And we share that back to the ecosystem to make sure that both job seekers and employers have the data that they need to make informed choices. And furthermore, this insight is going to become increasingly valuable to provide kind of the economic case for CDR, particularly within our shifting political context, which is unfortunately moving a little bit more from climate change focus. And instead, we might need to focus more on the narrative of the market opportunities and the job creation that CDR brings. So just to introduce you to who we are, so we are a team of 4 co-founders, so led by Sebastian Manhart, who I think probably does not need any introductions in this space, but he's kind of leading our commercial side and he's based out of Italy and Portugal. And Tank Chen, who will be very familiar to those of you watching, who's kind of in various different projects across the CDR ecospace, and he is kind of leading on our analytics side. Myself, I'm leading kind of the marketing side of the company, where I'm working really closely with the clients to figure out what kind of their talent needs are and try to figure out where we can source those talent from in kind of a creative way. And Pierre is our techie who has helped us build up our platform and get it to the incredible seamless experience that it is today. And very excitingly, we just recruited our first hire, Polar, who's based out of Kenya, to lead our social media. And we're also working with Rodin, who is leading on kind of getting all the data that we need on the job side to make sure that all those jobs are showing up into the database on a daily basis. So we're a numbers company, so I thought I'd share some data with you on how it's going so far. So since we started in May, we've logged over 2,285 jobs across over 685 companies that we're tracking, and more every day. So if you are a company and we haven't got your jobs, please do reach out to us and let us know. We'd be more than happy to put you onto the platform. We've had over nearly 3,000 unique job viewers on our board, kind of, I think, which is demonstrating the kind of interest in CDR as a sector. And we definitely probably have more job seekers than we do have jobs right now, but hopefully that will change in future. We've got 3,700 followers on LinkedIn, nearly 2,000 newsletter subscribers to our newsletter called Out of Thin Air, which is the only newsletter that is dedicated specifically for CDR job seekers, where we share kind of job market updates. We profile jobs and companies and provide valuable resources to people who are particularly looking to transition either from within CDR or from outside of CDR into this space. And in September, we launched our first ever CDR salary survey. And since then, we've had almost 800 downloads of the report. And we'll share kind of some of those insights with you a little bit later. So far, we're excited to share that we're working with 11 clients across the whole CDR ecosystem. So this kind of spans from the marketplaces such as Supercritical and Carbon Future to the various trade associations like AFEN, which is in France, the Direct Air Coalition, and the International Biochar Initiative, along with some of those industry players such as Newstark, ARCA, Yama, Carboforce, CO2 180, and 0x. So we're really excited to be partnering with them and look forward to partnering hopefully with more of you in future. So I thought I would go over just the CDR job market, kind of using the data that we've managed to capture over the past 6 months to give you kind of an insight into how the CDR market is shaping. So first off is where the CDR jobs are located. So if we look at this, we can see that nearly half of all jobs are just located in just 2 places, the US and Germany. And that in the top 10 countries represent over 90% of all the jobs in CDR. So we're definitely seeing that kind of concentration of these CDR kind of hotspots, as we call them. And when we look at the companies as well, that's kind of also similar. So the USA accounts for nearly 1/3 of all CDR companies currently, and the top 5 of the countries represent nearly 3/4 of CDR companies. So yes, right now we're still very much concentrated across the United States and Europe. I think it would be also important to look at kind of the preferred work arrangement. So we're increasingly working in kind of like a remote first kind of industries. However, what we've actually seen in CDR is about less than 1/3 are remote, and with another third roughly hybrid. But still 42% of jobs are still requiring on-site, which I think is kind of testament to the kind of industry that we're literally figuratively building, which requires a lot of kind of more on-site stuff like engineering and R&D and science and all that stuff. So it's kind of no surprise in a way that we still have a lot of high concentration of on-site jobs. Now, which sub-industry is creating the most growth? So we've seen that DAC is definitely dominating here. So 1/3 of all jobs created and over 20% of CDR companies are in DAC. This is really testament to the amount of public and also private funding that we've been seeing for DAC, particularly coming out of the United States in terms of policies such as the DOE is putting a lot of funding into DAC, as well as the 45Q, which benefits DAC. So I guess that's really not surprising. But what kind of was interesting to see as well is that the ecosystem services represent the largest sub-industry in terms of the number of companies. They have about 30% of the market is in ecosystem services, but they're not necessarily representing the same amount in terms of the actual roles that are open at the moment. Sorry. CDR roles by seniority. So if we look at this, we can see immediately that there's just a small percentage, just only 3% of CDR jobs that are for the more senior level roles. So I think this is indicative of the fact that we're still quite a young industry with a lot of young professionals in here. I think those senior roles or more leadership type roles are often at the moment occupied by a lot of the more startup founders themselves. So perhaps as this industry matures, we'll see some of those more senior level positions kind of grow as well. And in terms of top CDR employers, so we can see here that, again, for those of you who are working in this industry, are no stranger to Climeworks. Climeworks is really the top employer by quite a margin. She's almost double the next highest one. So they represent a total of 7.5% of all jobs currently in the CDR market over the last 6 months. So as you can see, I've just put in here as well that this is data that's tracking over 242 companies and over 2,000 roles. And I wanted to give us an overview today as well of the CDR salaries from 2004, which is from our report that we released in September. So I wanted to start importantly with the why. So why did we set out, why was this our first kind of flagship report? Well, it became clear to us pretty quickly when we started back in May that there was a real need for both employers and for job seekers to have information about salaries, because this is a new industry. They didn't know where to benchmark their salaries from. And for us as a company, we were also really, it for us was pivotal to have salary transparency as an integral to smashing the ceilings and ensuring equality in the sector, because we had this unique opportunity from the beginning of this industry to build it right from the beginning. So that's why we kind of set out to look at whether there are any differences in pays related to gender, disability, and ethnicity. And I kind of will share some more of that information of the findings in a minute. So I think the big thing coming out of our salary report was really this kind of big number of the median salary, which we found globally was $115,000. And this created quite a little bit of a shock in the community, particularly for those of us not working in the context of the United States, and even some worry from some people that we've spoken to as well, saying like, oh my goodness, everyone's going to start demanding raises as soon as the next day, when this report came out. So what we wanted to make sure is that we contextualize this a little bit, because the data set from the US was very high, and also a lot of the data that we got was from the United States. So obviously it skewed the data in that favor. So we kind of wanted to demonstrate what it would look like if we took out the US. And without that, it was just under 80,000, which was kind of more in line with some of the other countries that we were seeing there as well, particularly in the US context. We didn't have a lot of data for some of the global south, but we included Kenya and India, even though those, again, the sample size was quite small there, just to give a kind of indication of the disparity between salaries across the world, and that it's not all going to be the same. And just kind of wanted to keep in mind what that kind of implications that this global median salary may have on the whole market, on the whole ecosystem. Another thing we wanted to share was kind of what the salaries look like by role types. There weren't really any surprises, I guess, in this kind of finding. It is kind of similar that we see in other sectors, with kind of software engineering being really high. I think what was surprising, I guess, was the policy one was the second highest. However, it's to say that this is a very in-demand role that we often get people reaching out to us about. However, it is kind of, those jobs are few and far between, unfortunately. And I just kind of indicated as well on there, there's two that had kind of low data sets. So again, just keep that in mind when analyzing this data. Similar to kind of other industries, experienced professionals earn roughly double what early stage professionals do. And again, that is quite similar in other sectors as well, which later stage employees can kind of gain 2 to 3 times what early stage counterparts do. And as I said at the beginning, we kind of wanted to look at whether there was any disparities in pay. And we didn't have enough data, unfortunately, to look at ethnicity and disability, because these were self-report questions that we didn't want to make mandatory in the questionnaire. So this is just something that we gave people the option to. We had a lot of data for the gender pay. So we looked into that. And we're hoping that in future editions of this, that we will have more data that we can look into some of those other dimensions as well. So I think what was the big takeaway here was that, perhaps reassuringly, there was no gender pay gap. So if you look at this data here, you can see at the beginning, they're pretty much bang on right in the middle. They're earning the same. And for the most part, they outperform their male counterparts, which is kind of reassuring to see. However, when we looked at gender and seniority, we found some more interesting things. We saw that within the C-suite in particular, only 28% of those were women. And of those, they were also paid less, so around 14% less. So this is commonly referred to as the kind of glass ceiling. Again, we wanted to caveat that, this data is kind of preliminary. This is not necessarily saying that we 100% have this problem in our sector, but this is something that we wanted to shine a light on and make sure that people are taking into account and looking at early on, and at least tracking internally within their companies and asking those questions as, do we have this problem within our company? And if so, why do we have it and how can we fix it? So where do we go from here? So I just want to kind of share a little bit about what we're planning for 2025. So we want to continue to improve on our tech for seamless kind of user experience. We've had some really good feedback about our job board and how it's working. And we want to make sure that that continues to evolve, and especially the ways in which we're gathering all the data from the internet of the jobs that are available. So really excitingly is that we're trying to develop 3 more flagship reports over the next year. The 2025 salary survey will be coming out later, probably about mid next year. So if you do see call outs for that, so that's my kind of plug for you, is if you see that on LinkedIn, please do fill in the salary survey, because our insights are only ever as good as the data that we actually receive. So initially, even though we had so much interest in the salary data, when we actually put the call out there for people to submit that data, we were kind of surprised that there seemed to be a mismatch between, we only got about 400 people responding to the survey, and we were kind of expecting more like thousands given the level of interest that there was in this. So that's something we're looking forward to doing next year. We also want to look at the market report we want to take all this data that we've managed to kind of gather over the last year and kind of leverage it to produce kind of like a snapshot of where this industry is really growing, and kind of document how the growth is looking like in the sector, where we can map kind of the distribution and highlight the demand for talent across the different regions and methods, and kind of explore the different skill sets, the professional backgrounds, the education levels required, with the expectations of deriving kind of these insights on where these gaps and trends might be indicating where the industry is growing. And last, we also would like to create a kind of working in CDR report. A lot of the people who are coming to us are wanting to transition into CDR space. So we really want to help bridge that gap between what the industry might need and what's the available talent there is, so that we can support kind of a more informed workforce to produce kind of this like comprehensive guide that will, we want to talk to different people like hiring managers to identify some of their priorities and the pathways, and to provide kind of actionable advice and practical resources for job seekers. So yes, that's some of the things that we're looking to. And then, we're continuing to build our brand and offer value to our clients to try to think of innovative ways in which they can source and find the talent that they need to grow their sector. So last but not least, just a plug. So I hope you can follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we kind of post all our latest information, job opportunities, data insights. That's everything that we put it on our LinkedIn. And if you're a job seeker, please do sign up for our newsletter, Out of Thin Air, where we kind of post all these really great resources for you to onboard yourself onto CDR. We profile different companies and clients, as well as different profiles of people. And we want to kind of do like my CDR journey, so people can understand some of the different pathways. We also share some very fun memes in there, which we steal from Twitter. Also, do check out our job board for all jobs in CDR. It's all your one-stop shop to find your job in CDR. And please do get in touch with us if you want to supercharge your hiring. Like I said, we've just signed our 11th client, and we're really looking forward to working with you.
Excellent. So cool. Really like it. I'm actually going to pull Tank up too. One thing I have to say, sorry, Tank, not to shock you there. I had to bring that up because first of all, I have to say, you saw Tank at the beginning, and then you saw he was listed as part of the team here. And people accuse me of being sort of everywhere or having my hands in every pocket in CDR, but I look like the Maytag repairman compared to Tank, who inches above his weight by an order. So anyway, Tank, I wanted to bring you up here since you do have a role actually in CDRjobs. And one thing I thought I would do too, Helen, if you don't mind, just to give people just a quick peek at the actual dashboard itself. I'm sure we provided the link in the comments so people can take a look at it. But let's just for a second take a look at how functional and user-friendly this is. If I'm able to find, I'll just share my whole screen. So if you take a look at this, can you guys see that? You should be able to see. Let me see here. Yeah. Okay. So you can see it's just very much when you go here and you click on find a job, it just brings you right to what you want, and you can do it by all sorts of different variables, where you are, job category. Anything you want to speak to with this, Helen, in terms of what we're looking at? Because I love what I'm seeing, and I know I can give an example of a few other people who have given me positive feedback too.
Yeah, no, we've been we started off, figuring out how we wanted to display this data, whether, there's so many different verticals and ways in which you can cut this job data, and we're trying to really make sure that we're keeping the user in mind. It's like, what are the frustration points? So yeah, we're looking at kind of, you can look by areas, by kind of CDR vertical. So if you're, not, some people are completely agnostic and don't want to work, they just want to work in CDR, they don't care. But if you're really wanting to work in biochar, you can just look by that. And yeah, making sure that you kind of filter down as well by kind of experience level was a kind of a difficult one for us to figure out, like, how do we do that? Because a lot of time that's not often said as well. Like, it's not explicit. So we've tried to make our best guess to make sure that you can find jobs that are kind of appropriate to where you're at. And then, yeah, so we're always open to feedback, and glad you found the experience positive so far.
Yeah, and I had, you guys went live, and then literally like 48 hours later, an old friend of mine from back in my youth reached out to me on LinkedIn. He's like, "Hey, I saw this job listed on this thing called CDRjobs. Do you know anything about this company?" So I know it's being used, and I think that that's a testament to how usable it is.
Yeah,
And it's
great.
also for we have a young sector that is diversifying and growing very quickly. But it's, I guess, for you guys, probably a key decision was like, when is the right time where a critical mass has sort of been reached that can justify the existence of such a platform? And I would imagine you pleased with the volume. It's there's a lot of people to really look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because we have definitely a lot of really enthusiastic people and knowledgeable people who want to transition into this space, but not everyone has worked into the space. So I think this is one of the challenges that we're finding is like, how do we, particularly when I talk to some of the clients, they're like, yeah, well, we have to have CDR experience. It's like, well, unfortunately, this is going to be a challenge that we're all going to experience is how do we, we're going to have to be used to people not coming from the sector. And then how do we kind of onboard them into CDR in a kind of sustainable way? Because a lot of these companies are startups who are struggling, to like, there's just not enough of them to do everything. So, but yeah, it's really exciting. So at the moment, probably more demand for of people than there are of jobs, but we're hoping that will change definitely in future.
Great. So we do have some really good questions coming in, which Tank and I will get to shortly. I do have some, some questions to start with. It warmed my heart. I didn't know that this CDR was early in your CDR experience. And this is kind of a meta question since I'm talking to somebody who's running CDRjobs. But we always ask, what kind of led you, I'm going to do kind of a double layer to this, given what CDRjobs is just how you yourself wound up where you are right now, what your journey into CDR is. And if just to tag on to that, I think one of the things that's really remarkable about the CDR industry is it started so fast in terms of people saying, oh, we got to do this. And so everybody that was coming in was new. And so we have this incredible diversity of people with different backgrounds that want a career jump all at once. And I think that is part of the secret sauce that's making CDR so dynamic. But let's start with you. How did you find yourself here?
Yeah, I definitely have a very diverse background. And I'm also similar to Tank that I started off with my career in education. I worked as a special education teacher in DC public schools, which is actually where I grew up myself. So I worked in that for a few years, and then I moved to the UK to kind of do a master's. And then I transitioned into international development, and I worked kind of predominantly in the research and the monitoring and evaluation space. So kind of like more data side of things. And then I kind of started I worked in a tech startup developing biometric identification for the international development sector. And there I got to lead our deployment teams and develop like the curriculum for the use of our technologies for projects that were like really all across the globe, spanning like education, maternal health care, cash transfer projects. And it was really like this amazing opportunity. I think anyone who's worked in startups, you learn so much during this time. And it's really kind of like a lifestyle is how I call like working in a startup. But it really kind of for me, the take home was that I saw firsthand what's possible to achieve with just like sheer determination, like the curiosity, the grit, and the creativity to solve like kind of novel problems. And this mentality is something that really I kind of took away from this incredible experience. And then kind of after that time, I had some babies, and then kind of COVID hit, and like the whole world just turned like absolutely upside down. And so I took a break for a few years. And then kind of as I was coming out of this, like what I call fog of motherhood and this kind of COVID years, I reached out to a friend of mine and former colleague, Sebastian Manhart, who was, I worked with for several years really closely in the tech startup. And he was working and had transitioned into CDR himself. And I think kind of his enthusiasm about this sector was definitely very contagious. And I suspect that I'm probably not the only Sebastian Manhart, like CDR convert out there. So we started kind of working together again in a way that was kind of like first very sustainable for me because I had two very young children, and we kind of have just been working really like symbiotically together in this kind of industry, predominantly in this policy space, and like leveraging LinkedIn to kind of spread the word about CDR and create this kind of community and bring them together, which has been really amazing for me to like be part of and see really develop. And that's kind of how CDRjobs emerged. Like I think we were just talking earlier this year, and he was like, oh, vaguely commenting, like we need to do something about jobs, CDRjobs, like this is definitely, we need to get people into the sector, maybe we should find a way to post regularly about this. And then I went on holiday and I came back and he was like, okay, yeah, we're going to start a company, and don't worry, I've assembled a team and we're going to launch in 6 weeks. So that was back in April, and here we are.
Yeah, that's Sebastian for you. For those of you who don't know,
Yeah.
Analytic Tech Society is one of those linchpin figures in global CDR who is not too far away from any kind of new thing that's making an impact. If Sebastian is watching, sorry to virtually make you blush there, but you also are a policy guy. And I know that you have a new, I believe, CDR policy podcast. So please do drop the link for that. I'll be back on the show. I think he's been on the show twice before. So, well, let's do this. You did mention it's just great data as well that you're sharing that. That's at least like half the value, I would say, is to be able to show that picture. And as a policy advocate myself, you said it correctly in the beginning, even prior to this major change that we're about to experience in administration. That is a key thing that you really have to put front and center is what is the economic benefit. So you're creating these like pretty rich data sets around where the jobs are and the kind of jobs are. So as an advocate, I'm salivating a little bit. One thing I'm curious if you could, one thing that would be really interesting, again, looking at it as we're trying to sort of present the economic and employment opportunity of CDR, is to really look at the kinds of jobs that are specific to CDR, specific CDR methods or pathways. So to be able to really look at how many construction jobs and how many, and can we project what this is going to look like? Do you see that as you go forward as being part of your analysis where you really look at, the kinds of jobs that are existing and projected to grow with the growth of the sector?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, as I kind of said, we are definitely looking to kind of provide those more rich data sets where we're like able to kind of drill down more. We kind of have been able to do kind of that top level analysis so far, but that's something we have kind of earmarked for 2025. But yeah, I mean, what is really kind of exciting about the CDR industry is that we really are going to be spanning so many different ranges of jobs, like you kind of touched on, right? Whether that's like your truck drivers and your machine operators, all the way to kind of your offices and people working, in business development, to people working in the labs, working on this technology and developing the science that maybe hasn't even been invented yet, So it's really going to span across an entire industry. I think currently, the estimates are that anywhere between 30,000 people are currently working in CDR. And, you always hear, oh, we need to become bigger than oil and gas. And to contextualize that, the oil and gas industry is about 10.8 million jobs that they employ across the United States, which is about 5% of the workforce. We've seen projections from very many different reports, but BCG estimates that 670,000 jobs in Europe. Another report from the US is saying around 440,000 full-time jobs, not just like periodic jobs, because obviously there's some construction jobs that will be kind of specific to a particular project, and then that will end. So there's definitely like a huge growth market opportunity here, and like you said, employment opportunity for the jobs in the United States. And I think that's how a lot of the dialogue will start to shift in the CDR industry, or will need to shift. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. And I think just one thing, just to my own sort of armchair on the spot interpretation of one of the surprises that you said you saw is that high level median income.
Mm.
That's probably pretty symptomatic of an early stage sector that's really recruiting its co-founders and the people that would be more in leadership roles. And I would imagine as it grows and we get more diversified forms of employment, that'll probably
Yeah.
shift. Is that sort of your interpretation of why that number's higher?
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, also the cost of living and jobs and salaries are just generally higher in the United States anyway. So I think that's why some of that data was quite high. So I mean, yeah, it wasn't really surprising when you look at it at a country level. Like Switzerland had really high salaries as well, which again, we know Switzerland has high cost of living and higher salaries. But what I think is going to be interesting is how we're competing globally for the talent and how that high median salaries that's influenced by the US is going to have a ripple effect across the whole industry potentially, right? Because we're all going to be fighting for the same talent because we need to grow and there's only so many experienced professionals in the sector. So that's going to have an influence as well. But like you said, perhaps costs will also drive down as we start to incorporate a wider range of jobs, because at the moment our salary survey probably didn't capture, those kind of more end processing people or the truck drivers or those kind of things. We're not capturing that side of the data yet. So yeah, I think you're right.
Great. And I'm wondering, just looking at again the way you parse the data and the jobs and employers by country and by city. And I'm wondering, I'm just out of curiosity, when you look at the US, is it the case that 80% of those companies and jobs are in California, or is there a real lumpiness if you just take one of the, let's take the US, given how the outsized sort of position it currently has in the sector, where are you sort of seeing the hotspots or hubs or ecosystems really sort of take off within the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we're definitely hoping to look more granularly at in future reports. However, I think broadly, you're right. I mean, what we see is kind of a large presence of DAC companies, for example, coming out of the United States. So we're going to see bigger hotspots there, and we definitely see hotspots in kind of San Francisco and California. We see them in Texas, where they're building up things as well. So yeah, there are concentrations depending on where the funding. So for example, the DAC, the regional hubs, that's going to have an influence of where the concentration is in the United States as well. In Europe context, broadly, we're kind of seeing a lot more ecosystem players who are delivering more like SAS products. So there you might see more roles like software engineerings or MRV roles and things like that. But yeah, so stay tuned. We're definitely going to be looking and kind of drilling down into that more granular data in 2025. And Tank, I'm looking at you.
Yeah. One thing that'll be really interesting to see too is the sector and the pathways grow. Like right now you have, DAC obviously has a lot of the jobs. And to see, is that more symptomatic of the level of investment and the number of startups, or is it more inherently labor intensive than some of these other sectors? And I guess we can hazard a guess now, but we won't really know real growth, I think. Really, really excited in your analysis that you're looking at the gender gap. And it sounds like, if data permits, you're looking at also, around other sort of diversity variables. Have you considered adding to the profiles of the jobs, the companies that are included in the jobs, if something's a women-owned business or a minority-owned business? There's a lot of women founders I find in this space. So has that been considered at all as possibly a layer that you'd put into the platform?
Well, that's a really interesting suggestion, and that's something we could definitely be open up into. I think that's definitely from like a marketing perspective when I'm thinking about how I'm going to attract a talent. I think those are some of the USPs like companies definitely should be leveraging, right? Is like, hey, this is a women-owned company, and you can definitely see kind of as an exercise when you go to different companies' websites, you can kind of begin to see some of their values like come through. And when I have calls with my clients, these are definitely some of the things that I definitely want to tease out from them is like, who are you looking for? Like, not just beyond like experience and skill set, but like what makes a successful candidate in your kind of company? Because each company has its own kind of culture and things that they kind of, who is successful. Some companies want to have, that really startup mentality person. They really want someone to kind of get in there and just figure out and solve novel problems. Whereas some companies are a little bit more traditional and they're like, no, maybe those type of people won't do as well in our company. So yeah, I think there's definitely different dimensions we could do to ensure that we're kind of advocating for that diversity. And I think, yeah, that's a really good suggestion that I will bring forward.
Great, and we'll move over to some of the questions. And again, I encourage people to ask some more. And Tank, you can also jump in if you have any comments or questions. But you mentioned some of the surprises that came out of the data already, and I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more if there's any other things that sort of kind of popped up in the noise that were surprises, but also are there kind of clear trends or at least patterns in the data that allow you to speculate on the direction of the sort of job market for CDR, whether it's pathway specific or as a whole?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think the first thing that popped up for us regarding the salary survey in particular is like just how little transparency there was to begin with, right? So less than 50% of companies had this data and less than 25% of the jobs posted. So that's salary transparency was something that in and of itself, and the lack of that and the opacity of that was something that was perhaps surprising to me, at least, maybe not surprising to people in other sectors where it's the norm. But the kind of three main things that came out of the report itself, but I think that were surprising to us was kind of the geographic distribution and how it was concentrated in so few countries. I mean, like half the jobs in just 2 countries. And so what this really means, along with the fact that only a third of jobs are remote, is that it really leaves out a lot of the global talent pool to work in CDR. So that's something to really think about, and kind of as an industry, how can we kind of overcome that and open that up? The other thing was kind of, the big salary gap between the US, like we touched on this a lot, is how it's going to affect the global median salary and how that, what that'll mean for like attracting and competing for that talent, and particularly implications if that will have any for global South companies. They're going to have a hard time attracting talent from outside to come into those companies, right? So they're probably going to have to be relying kind of on homegrown talent there, which is a good thing as well, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, we really wanted to look at, gender, ethnicity, disability, and hopefully in future, this is something that we will. I would say we never really like fully reported on this, but kind of just interestingly, like disability, like again, it was something that I'm particularly passionate about. I was a special needs educator myself, but out of the self-report, completely voluntarily, about 5% of people who submitted data disclosed that they self-identified as having a disability. So again, that's something that as companies we need to start thinking about, is like how can we work and attract and make like accommodations for people who perhaps identify as neurodiverse, for example. So just kind of starting to think about that proactively as well is something that hopefully we can help the industry shape up a little bit in that way.
I love that, and keep it honest as well. The fact that you're doing this data. It's interesting. I always say a lot with open air that there probably wouldn't have been an open air takeoff, or at least in the way that it took off, had we not been contemporaneous with COVID, which sort of forced you on virtual work. It allowed people to have more flexibility and participate. And I do wonder, this is maybe more of just an open question, that given the sector really did sort of become part of the public imagination, I think, in the early years with COVID, if there's a greater tolerance for virtual work or sort of native understanding of that compared to other sectors at similar stages. Don't know if there's an answer, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know that I myself, I had a child during COVID. So in a way, it opened it up for me a little bit more, right? Because I was just like, oh, wow, there's just generally more acceptance of flexibility to begin with. And so if you overlay that with an industry that kind of started booming around that same time, that just became the norm and acceptance. Whereas like more traditional companies are kind of sometimes reverting back now to the way things were. Kind of had this like nice little bubble of like when everybody's like, yes, that's fine, everyone's remote, that's fine. But then some companies will be like, no, actually, don't, now get back to work. So hopefully, maybe, we will see that. But however, like I said, because this is an industry that is literally building things, there's always going to remain a proportion of those jobs that are going to be required to be on site, right? But it's just about how you kind of have this hybrid company. And there are some companies that we are working with that are really doing that really interestingly. Like some companies are saying we're remote first, and we are trying to really hold on to that. So that's a challenge and an interesting growth opportunity for a lot of companies, is like, how do they build those cultures and those teams in these kind of remote first opportunities? And that is going to be allowing to them to be more inclusive as well.
Great. Well, in our remaining time, let's go ahead and pick up a couple. We have a few good questions in there. Great questions, actually. And folks can please type in the comments. Tank, anything you wanted to add before you pick up the first question? I think the first one's from Kevin, if we do it in chronological order, but let me know if you have anything to say.
Yeah, so I would like to add that, we really started the company with data in mind as well. I think this is CDR was exactly the same. This is started to show people that CDR is a thing, and that there are actual folks working in the fields, on the ground, building technologies or trying to come up with solutions, and that the job roles are very diverse, and there's really the sense that everyone there is something for everyone to contribute. Yeah, and then we wanted to show that, we know that the data exists out there, but yeah, so we wanted to compile that into one space and be able to showcase that. Yeah, and how, geographically diverse this is, right? That this is happening, in every space, and that you could participate. You could be a person in. I'm based in Taiwan, and I'm participating in building this ecosystem. Yeah, for the whole world, and I think that was very exciting. And yeah,
I like that link you just made. It's like, this CDR. You're right. That was sort of the idea with these real deep dive kind of qualitative vignettes, and you guys are a great counterpart where it's a sort of database thing that tells its own story. And to that end, I will say, Helen, just as it's occurring to me, and Tank, shocker, is involved in this as well, but we are looking to reboot significantly our website for the first of the year. And it would be very cool, if possible, if there's a widget or something from CDR that we can embed. We should create we have a jobs post, on our Discord, but we could potentially have some form of, API linkage where new jobs just sort of pop up, or with a bot, people could ask questions. It could be linked to you guys. So definitely pursue that, but it's just, mine is going in that direction based on what you said. So yeah, Tank, let's do our first question.
Okay, here. So let's see. We have a question from Kevin. Kevin, let's answer this one first. So one of our the criteria, or the categories on CDR jobs, is sustainability. So Kevin wants to know, what does it mean to have sustainability as a job category within CDR? Yeah.
That's a very, very good question, Kevin, and something that I have grappled with myself. And Tank, you definitely know, you and I have had many conversations about what does this mean exactly. So I think one of the challenges when building, this platform is how do we categorize things and cut these jobs in a way that becomes then user friendly for people. So sustainability is kind of a big catch-all. We struggled a little bit with this one, but I think it relates mostly or predominantly to jobs that are kind of in bigger kind of corporations, that are not necessarily CDR specific. And Tank, I don't know if you can elaborate more on this, because you definitely are more deeper in the data.
Yeah, so this goes on both sides. So you have the supplier side, or you have the CDR job side, where this is usually in a company where there are hiring business development people or salespeople that needs to have sustainability knowledge, so to be able to help clients with their decarbonization strategy and incorporate CDR into that strategy. So that is one of the requirements that they would have for as a discipline, that they will, or a criteria they would like to the employee to have. And then, like Helen said, on the other side is it's really how do you communicate with the clients who are sustainability officers, and or that you are you're part of a bigger, you're part of the sustainability team, and you are tasked to look into carbon dioxide removal as very specific strategies. Yeah, so that's what
I think one of the challenges we have, and Tank knows this very well, is we kind of what constitutes a CDR job, right? So it's kind of clear cut when we have a CDR startup and companies. That's very clear. We list your jobs. But more broadly, we have what we call our yellow categories, which is, if Microsoft has a role that is kind of specific to carbon removal, and it's the same thing within the sustainability space, a lot of sustainability officers and things like that will particularly have a role specifically more targeted towards carbon dioxide. So these are some of the challenges that we have, is how do we identify and categorize jobs into the right areas? Because, we kind of get a job description and we have to pull from there and put them into the right bucket so that it kind of becomes searchable and user friendly for our different job seekers out there. So yeah, definitely open to feedback. If you ever have any questions like that, please do reach out to us. We're always asking for feedback. This tool is only as good as what people tell us as well.
Great question, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you. And then Corey, I think, has a related question. So it's also a job category question. So it's saying that where are the software engineering roles? Is it from the supplier side? When I mean suppliers, I mean, carbon removal credit generating companies, or are they looking for software development, or at macro level, where does this supply side startup start looking to build out software capacity?
Great question. I feel like Tank, you might be positioned better to answer this question because you're kind of knee deep in looking at the database of the different jobs and at the early stages, you yourself were entering them into the different verticals. So, I mean, my understanding is that a lot of the software side comes from more of like the ecosystem players, right? When you're looking at this kind of software as a service type of thing, the marketplaces will be looking at hiring software engineers in order to get that platform, particularly things with MRV tools as well. But yeah, Tank, do you have any more?
Yeah, that's what I would, that's what I would say as well, that it's more on the ecosystem side that we see a lot of companies looking for software development. This is for build out, this could be for carbon financing, this could be for MRV, this could be for carbon management more broadly. And yeah, on the development side, sort of the CDR supplier side, yes, there are a few. Can't remember on top of my head which ones, but yes, they do exist, but sort of fewer in the supplier side. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, cool. Well, why don't we do this? I think we had some other questions that were sort of subsumed, I think, in our other conversation. But Helen, wanna again, thank you so much for this, joining us today. Congratulations on a very strong launch, and I really do look forward to for Open Air being as helpful as possible, as being yet another place where people's eyeballs can sort of land on CDRjobs. So let's definitely talk about that in 25. But with that, I will go ahead and tell folks about what we have coming up. Again, thanks so much, Helen. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. We have a pretty exciting some stuff coming up here, which I'm really thrilled about. I'll go ahead and, sorry about this, guys, little fumble thumbs here. Go ahead and press present on that and go back a little bit. So we do have next week, I'm really excited about our guest here, Brendan Hermelin. I'm a New Yorker, as many people know, and I'm really excited by the way that New York City's carbon tech CDR ecosystem is sort of stealthily taking shape. And a number of the companies that are based in New York have a specific kind of niche where it's really about CDR applications in the urban built environment. And I can think of one that maybe is no more of a clear example of that than Thallo Labs. And this is a really cool company that's already deploying. In fact, they have a system deployed in the Empire State Building, and they're integrating direct air capture directly into buildings. And so Brendan will be on to tell us a bit about the company and their solution next week. So please join us for that. We're booked all the way through the end of the year. Then we'll take a break off for a couple of weeks during the holiday season and resume the beginning of January. But after Thallo Labs, really excited to have Lila Connors, who is the director producer of Legion 44, which is the first feature-length CDR documentary. It's wonderful. I was at the launch during Climate Week in New York. I've been sort of an advisor to the project. And so the goal now is to tell people about the film, but try to get it screened in as many places as possible. So Lila will be on telling us about the film, showing some cuts from it, and then what you can do to help to get other people to see it, maybe host a screening where you may be. And then yet another Sebastian Manhart influenced or approximate project, Carbon Future, Germany-based, amazing CDR certification methodology marketplace that is really quite active. So we'll have Hannes, the CEO, on for that to talk about Carbon Future, what they're doing, and their work puts them into contact with all sorts of other essential subjects around MRV and policy questions too. So that should be a great conversation. That'll be our last one before the end of the year. And then I did drop just a couple of links that occurred to me that are relevant here that are coming up. I'll be hosting a policy dialogue in LA at the amazing Alta Sea Port of Los Angeles site, which has some marine CDR demonstration projects. And we're hosting this for local policymakers to talk about the relevance of CDR within the context of California and how it relates to California's net zero goals just before the legislative session starts. That's why we timed it that way. So if you're in the Southern California area or want to go there, you can find the link there. That's on the 13th of December. And then maybe even more pertinent to what we just discussed is a few days before that in New York City, I'll be hosting with Cornell University at their amazing campus on Roosevelt Island, right next to Manhattan, a NYC Carbon Tech Showcase, half-day event. And here it'll be featuring some of the CDR innovators and accelerators and incubators that called New York City home. Be a strong policy emphasis for this too, but it's a great opportunity to meet some of the people that are making carbon tech and CDR happen in New York City. So with that, we can go ahead and wrap up the stream. Again, want to thank you so much, Helen, Tank, as always. Really appreciate your contribution here. And with that,
thanks so much for having us, Chris. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.